Hey everybody, this is a quick guide for how to get set up as a Skaven. This guide is intended for players who are playing on lower difficulties, who might not be entirely familiar with the Skaven as a race, or who might still be relatively new to Total War Warhammer 2 overall. The guide here is not intended necessarily to help you dominate on legendary difficulty, but rather to help you make informed decisions to get your campaign set up and to shine a light on some of the mechanics that are maybe a little less well known, especially for newer players, about the Skaven, or might be a little intimidating until you really get into the swing of things with this ratty race. So let's start off by talking about food. Food is one of the most important Skaven mechanics to keep in mind as you play, and it is unique to their faction, or to their race rather, so definitely want to keep that in mind as you play. The short version is, the more food you have, the faster your settlements grow. The faster your settlements grow, the quicker you can build more advanced buildings. You'll notice that for each of your settlement capitals, you have to consume population surplus in order to build these capital buildings, and you can't build the higher tier supplementary buildings unless you have your faction capital leveled up. So I can't build this tier 3 infantry building until I have a tier 3 settlement. I can't get tier 3 settlement until I have 2 population surplus, and I can't get population surplus until I have enough growth. I get more growth when I have more food. I get less growth when I have less food. You can get food in a number of different ways. You can get it from winning battles, you can get it from buildings, and you can get it from your technology tree, as well as a couple other things like raiding. So in general, you want to try to keep your food relatively high, but you also want to spend it. It's a resource, right? So if you just stockpile it and don't ever use it, it's not going to really be helping you out all that much, apart from getting you a little bit of extra growth, which is useful, but there's a lot more to food, which I'll get into in a little bit. The most important thing about food is that it can help you conquer settlements at a higher level. With any other faction, if I were to conquer Sabatoon over here, it's at level 1, and I'd get that settlement at level 1. But with Skaven, I can spend food, and I can actually conquer that settlement at level 3, which will give us immediate access to some of the higher tier buildings. So, what do I actually want to do first? So you might have noticed that I decided to move over here. Well, why is that? Why am I going for Sabatoon rather than the Sentinel of Time? The Sentinel of Time is undefended right now, so I could actually go down here and take this settlement. But if I colonize this settlement, my units will take a hit. You have to expend some of your unit health in order to colonize a settlement. So if I were starting here, it would take maybe 1 turn to get over here, another turn to get over here and colonize, and then maybe 2 or 3 turns to replenish my troops, which would give Sabatoon plenty of time to get reinforcements, or hire a hero or a lord or something like that. So I don't want to give them time to get in reinforcements. If I look at their garrison over here, I can see, okay, they got a couple of Saurus spears and a couple of skinks. It's not anything that I'm going to struggle with. So I want to get that settlement as quickly as possible so that I can get this whole province secured without crippling myself and having to wait several turns before I can do anything. So I've moved Skrolk over here to put him in a good position to get to the settlement next turn. You'll notice that I've consumed over 50% of my movement range. If I had stopped around here and I had 50% in movement range, I could have recruited a couple more units. I'm not going to worry about that right now, but you certainly could throw in a few more units if you want to have them in your roster. I'd rather save the money for now, though. Looking at our settlement capital, you notice that we do have the ability to upgrade this infantry building and build another building as well. So the temptation would be to jump right in and get some cooler units. Our clan rats are okay, but they're definitely not going to win us a ton of battles, certainly not on their own. So what should we do here? Well, we could jump in and get some of these range units, which are pretty useful. They're fast, they're good at harassing enemies, and we could get an assassin, which would let us take out enemy heroes. We could get some of these ranged units, which are quite useful and give way to some of the strongest units in the Skaven roster, but I'm actually going to go a different way. I'm going to go over here to the landmark tab, and I'm going to choose this building here. The Corrupted Spawning Pool is a unique landmark building that Skrolk has access to, which provides 5 food per turn in addition to growth and income from all buildings and a base income of 300. Very, very useful. Now, in my first few campaigns as Skrolk, I totally missed this building. I didn't realize that this little icon here, the strategic location icon, indicates that there's a unique building that you can construct. So when you're colonizing new settlements, always be sure to look at the little icons next to the climate icon and see what that settlement provides. On that note, you can see that this also provides exotic animals. Exotic animals really are useful for a couple things. They can be used to reduce the recruitment costs of things like cold ones if you're playing as a lizardman. They can be traded as a resource, although Skaven aren't going to be heavily diplomacy focused. But most importantly, for Skaven, if you get a level 2 exotic animal pen, you notice on the left it will generate 1 food per turn, which is great. And up to level 3, you can generate up to 2 food per turn. So without even having any battles, without raiding, without any technologies, if I build this building here, and this building here, the Corrupted Spawning Pool, I'm already going to get 8 food per turn. That is huge. Compare that to the right over here, the Dominating Scheme, which will, rights are pretty big deals. They cost money, they have cooldowns, they usually provide very significant effects for your whole faction, and that's only giving us 3 food per turn, which is still good, but consider how much you can get. So I'm going to make that initial investment. I'm going to get this Corrupted Spawning Pool, and I am actually going to get rid of this building here. Now, why are you getting rid of your melee infantry building? Well, that will all become clear very soon. Just be patient with me. The number one reason is to make room to get those exotic animals and that extra food production as quickly as possible. And with that all being said, I'm going to jump to Subbatoon. There's one more reason I want to go to Subbatoon, and you may have guessed it already. It is to get the pastures. So any settlement that has pastures is super important for Skaven, because pastures, similarly to exotic animals, will provide food. In fact, they'll provide more food than pastures. So if we get these buildings and we get this, we're going to be in a really, really good spot to set us up for the rest of the campaign. So let's end this first turn. Thanks for being patient as I go through all of those somewhat dry mechanics, but we are about to start building momentum and things are going to get interesting. So let's go to Subbatoon. I am going to auto-resolve this battle just because it is very, very easy. You can see the balance of power is strongly in our favor. We could fight this and take 0 casualties, but I don't think it's entirely necessary. I think we can go ahead and auto-resolve that. Alright, so notice that the first thing that pops up here is our food. We actually got 9 food for winning that very, very easy battle. That's great. And if you wanted to, rather than capturing this settlement, you could sack it over and over and over again. Meaning you could hit sack here and then wait till the next turn and sack it again, and you would get more food every time you go through that process. So sometimes it's useful to keep what's called a sack city and sack it over and over again to level up your lords and any heroes you might have in your army, as well as get additional food. I think for Skrolk we've got enough passive food generation, so I don't need to worry about that. I'm not going to sack it for now. However, remember that I mentioned that we can increase the settlement level by spending food. So if I do this, we're going to put ourselves way down to 19 food, so we're going to be at a bit of a debuff here, but we are going to get this settlement at level 3, and it's going to pay off very quickly. I'll show you why. So hit loot and occupy. Now we get this settlement. Okay, this is actually great. We got a little magic item, or a banner, I think, that will have us do more damage against lizardmen. So before I dive into that, though, let's go check out those pastures. So see, now that we've settled this settlement at level 3, it's actually at a higher level than our faction capital, which is great. Let's go ahead and get ourselves set up with those pastures. I guess they're actually called meat sties rather than pastures for the Skaven, but it's the same thing. So at level 1, for 800 gold, we're getting 4 food. That is great. And at level 3, which we can get in just a few turns, we're going to have 6 food. 6 food from this settlement, 5 food from this, 2 food from that. We are going to be drowning in this stuff, and that's going to help us really get leveled up with our other settlements very quickly while mitigating this as best we can. That's why I don't need to have a sack city with Skrolk the same way I do with others. Let's take a look. Okay, we've got a reptile thing sacrifice already equipped. That's great. As for skills, I think you always want to start off with Root Marcher, pretty much always. That extra campaign movement range is going to be great. Lightning Strike is something that is useful for a lot of different races. You don't really need it for Skrolk or for any Skaven rather, because you're always going to be in ambush stance, or stalking stance rather, which means that anytime you attack an enemy army that's outside of a settlement, you have a chance to ambush them, and ambushing an enemy will take them away from any nearby enemies. So we could be over here at the Guacamole Crater and have 4 or 5 different armies and pick them off one by one. So it might be useful to get Ancient Cunning to increase your ambush success chance, but you don't really need to go deep into this line of upgrades for Skrolk. You don't need to worry about Lightning Strike with Skaven, which is great. It lets us focus on all of his other really cool and unique faction mechanics and lord mechanics and unique abilities. Okay, that was a bit of a mouthful, but now we have set ourselves up with Subbatoon. Let's get that food in, and we can throw in the melee infantry building here if we want to, which will give us access to the chieftains and to storm vermin, or if we look at Skrolk's unique lord traits here, he's got Plague Lord. Plague Lord reduces the upkeep for Plague Monk Censer Bearers, and Catapults and Plague Priests, which is great. So with somebody like, what's his name, with Queek Headtaker, who boosts Clan Rats and Storm Vermin, I might actually want to get this as soon as possible. But for our Plague Lord over here, we're actually going to go straight for this building here. That will give us access to Plague Monks and Plague Priests, which are great units, especially for Skrolk. Now, notice that I can only build this building up to level 3, i.e. the first tier, because this is a minor settlement building. So I could actually go back to Uxhiel and get this built over here, but I can't because it's not at level 3 yet. And eventually you'll want to get these Plague Monk Censer Bearers. They're good units, and you'll want to get this particular building because it unlocks technologies and all that, but it's going to be a while before we have a settlement at tier 5. We don't really need these units right now. We want to get these guys as quickly as possible, so that's what I'm going to do. Especially since it's really not all that expensive. It's 2,000 gold, right? So get the Pox Cauldron. And then at this point, you can kind of evaluate what your options are. I'm going to go ahead and actually get the Construction Cavern, even though it's going to put us behind a little financially, because these Plague Claw Catapults are great units, and Skrolk reduces their upkeep costs. So why not have them? I have a little bit of money left over, so I'm going to go to Uxhiel and I'm going to make sure we got those exotic animals coming on. In a few turns, we'll be all set up to actually get ourselves those exotic animal cages. And finally, I'm going to just recruit a few Skaven Slaves. Skaven Slaves are fodder units. They really aren't good at anything other than getting in the enemy's way and slowing them down. But what they will do is buy us time to pepper them with plenty of shots from our catapults, in addition to letting our Plague Monks flank around and do tons of damage once we actually get into a battle. So let's end this turn and see where we're at the next turn. I think we just saw some activity over there at Guacamole Town. Nope, actually, there is still nobody there. Okay, that's actually great. So, I'm sorry, I clicked through that pretty quickly, but we have a quest here to delete the Southern Sentinels, and I think that's their last settlement, so we could go for that right away. We could also bring Skrolk down here and have him capture this settlement here, which would give us access to the commandments, because it gives us the full province. But if we do that, it's going to take him quite a couple of turns, maybe 2 or 3 turns to get down there. Even on March stance, it's going to take him a while to get down there. even if we use the underway. Oh yeah, that's the other thing that Skaven can do that I didn't mention is they have this use underway stance, which lets them jump over any terrain. So you can actually see, if I go to use underway, see how there's like this little yellow blob over here? That's part of our movement radius. And if I were to right click here, I could actually jump into this mountain range, as opposed to if I were to try to walk around it. I'm going to click and hold right click here, and you'll see it'll create a path to the mountain range, but it's going through this long path. And you can see the path color change from yellow to red to blue. That means it's going to take at least 3 turns to get us all the way over there. We don't want to do that. If we do want to be in these mountains at all, we want to be there quickly and efficiently. So, hey, I could go mess with the dwarves. I could go into underway stance, jump in here, mess with Thrice-Cursed Peak, and then jump right back out. I'm not going to do that right now, but it's definitely an option, and you definitely want to keep use underway in mind as the Skaven. It can get you in and out of some sticky situations. So let's poke our noses up here and see what's going on in Guacamole Crater. I'm going to click and drag so I make sure not to use more than 50% of my movement speed or movement range, so that I can still recruit units if I want to. And check that out, there's nobody there. So this might be actually a great time for us to assault that settlement. I am going to forego recruiting units for now, and I'm going to go right up to the walls and see what we can get done. So just a second here as I evaluate what our next move might be. It doesn't look like anybody has colonized these settlements here, which is fine. We don't have anything down here. Okay, so let's, so normally in this situation, what you could do is build some siege equipment, which would help your units get over the walls faster, and that wouldn't be a bad idea to do for sure. But their garrison isn't really all that strong. I think we can take them, especially with the Plague Claw catapults. So let's jump in and see what we can do with this battle. We'll probably take some casualties, but I just want to kind of have a chance to talk about the different units and their strengths and weaknesses. This would be a good opportunity to do that. Another thing to keep in mind is this mechanic called the Menace Below. I am going to plop 2 uses of the Menace Below down here so I can explain what that does. You don't really need it here, but hey, it doesn't hurt. Notice, however, that when we increase the uses of the Menace Below, our food goes down. And if we don't have enough food, we can't use it anymore. So it's free units, quote unquote, but it does come at a cost. And there's no free lunches, right? So let's go ahead and jump into this battle. We will take some casualties. Ideally, you would wait and build some siege equipment, but you know, I think it's useful to kind of jump in and have a bit of a scrappy battle to kind of demonstrate some of the strengths and weaknesses of these early game army units. Okay, so let's take a look at our deployment zone. This is a really small settlement. This shouldn't be too hard to take. As you probably already know, there are 2 ways that we can beat this battle. We can wipe out all their units or cause them to rout from the battlefield, or we can take this region over here and capture it in kind of a, you know, if you played Domination in Call of Duty or King of the Hill or whatever, you know, it's basically the same thing. You just have to hold this territory for 150 seconds and then you'll win. That being said, we're going to do something cool with the Menace Below to help us out with that in just a minute. Let's see. I didn't choose to gamble for more Winds of Magic because I don't know, I just never use that, but you can. Let's go over Skrolk's abilities very quickly. He has got Pestilent Breath, which is a breath attack. It goes out in a V shape and is really great for dealing with chaff or minor infantry units. And Blessed with Filth, which will give any of your units a poison debuff, which will significantly reduce the combat effectiveness of your opponents. Also, when he attacks enemies in melee, he reduces their leadership, and he does magical attacks which pierce their armor, but can be reduced by magical resistance. Our Plague Claw catapults, say that 10 times fast, are great for dealing with blobs of infantry or for dealing with towers or walls or whatever else. And the rest of our infantry are just going to kind of swarm them and do as much damage as they can. The Skaven Slave Slingers aren't going to be that useful here. It's hard to get a good angle. I'm going to bring them over here and see if they can lob some of their projectiles over the walls. As for the rest of these guys, I'm going to go dummy on this and just group them up and just send them in and adjust as we go. So let's just get started, just jump in and see how well we do. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, okay, they're firing missiles at us. We want to get out of the way of those. We want to get up on the walls as quickly as possible. So I'm going to have them all sent over here. They're going to run over there and try and climb the walls while these Skaven Slave Slingers draw fire. If you put them at a bit of an angle, they might be able to do a tiny bit of damage, throwing some heat on these units up on the wall. The Plague Claw catapults could do a couple of different things for us. We could have them attack one of these towers, which would disable their missile projectiles. We could have them damage the wall, which would create a hole in the wall and we could run right through, but that takes time. And isn't as cool as just blasting the crap out of them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have them lob their projectiles over here and smash the hell out of these sort of spears. And you can see one volley already did like a fifth to a quarter of their health, and it damaged their leadership, which you can see here. They've got the damage by artillery and discouraged by ability, so we can actually probably get them off the battlefield before they're anywhere near dead, just because, you know, getting pelted with blobs of buboes and snot and whatever the hell else the Skaven put into these things really isn't anybody's idea of a good time. Let's check on our slingers over here. They're you know, they exist. They're not going to help us out all that much. Bring them up here, maybe get them to try to pepper these guys. Technically speaking, we could just hang back and let the catapults deal with a lot of these infantry. We could, but I think that's a little boring, so let's see if we can do some more stuff. Now, I mentioned before that we could use the Menace below for some cool stuff. If these Saurus Spears would actually leave the AO, leave this capture point, then we could plop one of these guys down and have them help us capture. But unfortunately, they're staying there, so we're not going to be able to really do that. That being said, I'm gonna plop this down and just kind of demonstrate how it works. So to use the Menace below, you click on this, and then you can spawn a unit of clan rats anywhere on the map, behind walls, outside, anywhere you want. You can hold down the Alt key and click and drag, and that will let you adjust the trajectory of where the rats are going to come out. So let me just do that. Send them out here. We take a look down here, they will pop right out of the ground, boom, and swarm forward. So we'll have them go right ahead and attack these sort of spears. They wouldn't win on their own, but they're already damaged, so they'll probably do okay. Now notice over here that they are summoned units, so they will eventually disappear. They're not going to stay around for the whole battle, but they'll get some work done. That being said, I don't want them to necessarily get their butts kicked, so I'm going to make sure to take our Plague Claw catapults and have them fire at something else. We got lucky there, and they only hit the sort of spears, but it's very probable that they will eventually hit our own units. So I'm going to go back to our Plague Claw catapults. I'm going to look for something else. Oh, look at this. This is beautiful. They're all bunched up right here on top of the gate. Boom. I'm just going to have them get peppered over there. Our Skaven Slave Slingers are doing their job by attracting fire, and the rest of our units are on the walls, and hey look, they've actually been doing decent at eliminating some of these wall units. Okay, great, look at this. So our clan rats have now expired, they are dead, but we've managed to chase off these sort of spears. I have one more use of the Menace below. What I could do is pop it down over here and help these guys get rid of the skink cohort, but we're doing just fine against those. None of my other units are really in trouble. These guys are just staying there. I don't know why the AI decides they want to stay on the wall instead of fighting, but if I plop this down, I was hoping I could show you this cool trick with the Menace below, where as long as you have any units in here and they don't have any units in here, you'll slowly build up capture points. Unfortunately, they are, you can see that just sort of creeping in there. Unfortunately, the Saurus Warriors will come in here and they will destroy us, so we're not going to get a chance to capture. But something you can do with the Skaven is you can keep you know, all the enemies focused elsewhere, and you can actually capture with the menace below in some instances. Definitely helps if you have more uses of that spell. Okay, so really we've already technically won this battle. There's not really much they can do, but let's go over our units remaining and see what decisions we can make to make things interesting. Okay, I got these Skaven slaves. I might as well send them in just to, you know, be meat shields. Our plague monks are pretty good at dueling against other melee units, so they'll take damage, but they'll also do damage, so I'll send them to fight with the Saurus spears. Same thing over here. You'll notice that they haven't taken damage from our plague claw catapults. Why is that? Well, because they're actually obstructed. Now that they've moved, they found a firing solution, but if you ever look at your units, your ranged units, whether that be, you know, slingers or archers or artillery, and they have a little bow and arrow icon that's red, that means that there's something in their way that is prohibiting them from firing at their enemy. That could be one of your own troops, that could be terrain, or something like that. Meanwhile, these Skaven Slave Slingers are actually able to kind of fire over the wall, so if you put them in the right position, they might be able to do a little bit of damage. Something to keep in mind with the Saurus Warriors and Saurus Spears is that a lot of times they will have shields. These particular units don't, but it's quite common for the Lizard Men to equip their units with shields, so you want to hit them in the back, otherwise the shields will you know, block some of the projectile damage. So in this case, if we could get these guys set up over here and have them fire into the backs, they won't do a lot of damage, but they'll do a lot more than they would have otherwise. Similarly with the Plague Claw catapults, we can kind of see that, you know, the trajectory is indicating that we'll probably hit this tower, but we'll still be able to do something, so we could attack them with that. But I don't want to hurt them too much, because I want to show off Skrolk just a little bit. I've been abandoning our poor little ratty boy over here, and God, his unit is so cool. I love the glowing book on his back and all that. So take a look at these chanting monks over here. I love the Skaven unit so much. Sorry, I just had to take a moment to gush about that. He's going to go down and he's going to try and help out here. So what can Skrolk do? Apart from getting himself into melee, he can buff his units or he can damage the other units. So let's take a look at both of those things. The Bless with Filth ability will apply a poison debuff to your allies' weapons, which will reduce the enemy combat effectiveness. That's pretty useful. Now, Plague Monks already have, I think, they have a debuff ability. I'm not sure. Physical resistance. No, I guess they don't. I guess that's just the Sensor Bearers. Let's check out the Sensor Bearers. Yeah, because the Sensor Bearers have this Plague Sensor, which already applies a debuff to the enemies, whereas the Plague Monks don't, I believe. But now that they have Blessed with Filth, you can see that the Saurus Warriors' leadership and speed are reduced. Their weapon strength is reduced, so poison's super useful. Doesn't last for too long, but it is useful. We've also got this ability, Pestilent Breath. So if you're just starting out, you might be like, well, why the hell would I use this ability? I have to weirdly position my Lord, and it only goes in one direction. But if you hold, is it Alt? Yeah, if you hold Alt and click, you can change the trajectory of the ability. So let's watch carefully what happens when we use this breath ability. I'm gonna hold left click and damn it. There we go. I'm gonna hold Alt and left click and then fire. Bad timing there. But notice how that spreads out. You can see that it goes out in a cone and it gets wider and wider towards the end, like a cone does. So you want to try and predict where that trajectory is going to go and hit as many infantry units as you can. Let's see, with just that ability, we did almost 1,000 damage, so that's not bad, especially for something that only costs 8 winds of magic. Anyway, we won this battle, no surprise there, it was a very easy victory. That being said, let's pop on out and see where that leaves us. Luch Mandor is his name. I love the lizard men names, they're so cool. I think we've got one that's actually called Mudkip or something like that. Okay, great. So we got 10 food. That puts us back up to the orange tier, which is quite useful. Our Plague Monks, Sensor Bearers did a great job. So did our Catapults. We got a new banner. That's great. That'll increase our melee attack. So let's just throw that on one of our Plague Monks over here. That's not going to hurt at all for sure. Or you know what? Let's put it on Skrolk and give him some more action. Now, we could do a couple of different things here. We could capture the settlement like we did before, but we don't actually have enough food to put it up to level 3. And not only that, it's a faction capital, so we could get it up to 4 or even 5 if we had enough food. If we set it at level 2, we're not really doing ourselves any favors. We're actually putting ourselves at a disadvantage by keeping us in red tier for food. So I'm gonna leave that there, and I'm gonna sack the city. The reason I decided to sack the city is because I wanted the little bit of extra food that you'll get from doing that. A little bit of extra money. We don't actually need to capture that settlement right now. If we do, we'll have this settlement capital. Okay, that's not a bad thing, but it'll only be level 2, and we still won't have this. So now we'll have 2 incomplete regions, which sometimes that works, but I don't really think we need to do that right now. Now, I could stay here, or I could put myself in March stance and go back to my own province, which will give us a little bit extra replenishment. You see that? So I'm going to do that because I'm probably going to want to attack this settlement again next turn and get some more food. And in fact, we could keep doing that until we have enough food to settle it at level 3 or level 4. Now, obviously, the top tier that you can get is level 5. However, you need quite a bit of food. I think you need 80 food to settle at level 4, and I think 120, 130 to settle at level 5. Notice our maximum food right now is only 110, so I don't think we can actually settle at level 5 now. So how do you increase your food? Well, there's a couple of different ways. Notice that your settlement capitals provide increased food capacity. You can see that over there on the left. And also technologies like monstrous plans and virulent plans. Any of the plans technologies will also increase your food capacity by a lot. So really, I think you only need one of these in order to be able to colonize at level 5. That being said, these initial plans don't increase it, but any of the advanced plans do. Yeah, plans within plans does, ingenious plans. So, all right. That being said, I'm going to do something a tiny bit cheesy here. I guess it's not really cheesy. I'm going to recruit a lord. It doesn't really matter which one. And I'm going to send him over here to capture the Sentinel of Time. That will just help us secure this province faster without having to bring Skrolk over here and waste his time. Looks like we do have some sentinels over here that might provide us with a bit of difficulty, but I think we can deal with them if that comes up. Okay, that was 2 turns, and it took us a half an hour to get through that, so, or 3 turns rather. So it will start to pick up momentum now because we have our first food building over here, we have this built, we have this built. Now notice that our food is still only at +1. Why is that? Because our settlement is costing us 2 food and our army is costing us 2 food. So every army that you have will increase your food consumption by a little bit. I think it's 2, right? 2 per army beyond your first base one. It could be that it's 1 per army. We can test that later. But essentially, the important thing to remember is the more armies you have, the more settlements you have, the more food you're going to need to consume. So expanding very, very quickly and building a ton of armies very, very quickly, you can do that, but you need to keep in mind what the costs of that will be. And now we have another problem to deal with. So our quote-unquote friends over here, the Blessed Dread, have colonized that spot. Now we have a bit of a dilemma, because the Blessed Dread are one of the few factions in this entire region that will actually give us the time of day. We can have a non-aggression pact with them, and I think we can eventually trade with them, although it's not an option right now. And it's definitely good to have allies in Lustria, because most of Lustria is overrun with things that hate us. The dwarves don't want to play with us. These guys over here, which clan are they? I forget. Yeah, Clan Spittle. They will possibly trade with us, but they might betray us and they might try to screw us over. The Awakened, surprisingly, doesn't hate me. Maybe it's just on higher difficulties, but usually they will also try to attack me. So, and then we have Clan Scryer over here, which we'll probably get along with, but still, we kind of need allies. But we also need this settlement. And as I mentioned before, when you colonize a settlement, your units will take some quote-unquote damage. Like, it'll consume some of your units to capture the settlement. So now would be a good time to attack them. except for the fact that Skrolk is over here and this guy's over there. So I think in this case I'm actually gonna let that sit for a minute and get rid of this guy. And what I'm gonna do is, Dark Elves are fairly strong, Lokir's fairly strong, so I want to build up my forces a little bit. Before I attack them, I'm gonna want a couple more Plague Monks and a couple more Plague Claw Catapults. You don't really need them, but it's definitely gonna help. And those buildings aren't done yet, but they will be next turn. So for this turn, once again, I am just going to jump right over here to the Guacamole Center. I am going to auto-resolve this because we already, I was going to auto-resolve it, but the battle is, the balance of power isn't really in our favor, but I am going to speed up this battle because you've already seen how this works. I might take a second to kind of talk a little bit about Skrolk's mechanics in a little bit more detail. But essentially, you know what this is. You know how this is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and just speed this up. I'm going to get my melee infantry to storm the walls. I'm going to get my spammy boys to go over here. Skrolk ought to be up on the walls too. This is really scrappy. I'm definitely going to take casualties. There's definitely cleaner ways to do this. But, like I said, don't want to be too redundant here. I just want to get this done quickly. I'll set these to fire here. And let's just get this done as quickly as possible. Yep, so as our Skaven slaves come over the wall, I'm just going to send them into capture. I am going to have our Skaven slaves attack those guys. Okay, they're doing some damage, they're doing their job. They don't have to excel at it, they just need to keep them occupied. Well, here's an opportunity to talk about these Plague Claw Catapults. Notice that they just decided to abandon their post and they're going to go up and try to make out with the walls. You often will want to put them on guard mode because otherwise they'll try to chase whatever you have set them to fire at until they can find a proper firing solution. They're not going to find one because there's a friggin' wall in the way, so they're just going to go up and bump against the walls. It's kind of stupid. You don't want that to happen. They're going to be friggin' useless. So put them back here, put them on guard mode, and fire at will if you want them to fire at whatever they have in their range. And if you don't, then you want to just put them on not fire at will and manually target. Okay, what else is going on? We got our Plague Monks and Censer Bearers coming in here. They're going to do their job. Skrolk himself is dueling. Who's he dueling? He's up against a skink. He should be able to win. It doesn't look like he's doing a very good job, though. So let's go ahead and buff him. He's probably going to take off. Very quickly, I'm going to throw out one of these breath attacks. Just whittle these guys down a little bit. Notice that did quite a bit of damage. He's already up to 2,600 damage, but he is getting his little tail kick there, so I'm going to bring him down, put him into melee with some of the lower tier units. That will prevent him from getting chunked too hard. These guys are bunching up over here, so I'm going to try and get them. They can't go through there, right? No. I'm going to just try and get them to rush. Once again, this is not an exemplary battle by any means. I'm just trying to do this as quickly as possible. Let's have these units take care of those. The Censer Bearers can go right up in here and take care of those. Now Skrolk is doing better because he's up against some random infantry. Some skinks can absolutely shred skinks. No problem there. Plague Claw Catapults are going to hurt our own units probably, but that's alright. Just in case, we'll bring these guys around here and have them approach from the other side in case we get some stragglers. We should have enough units in here pretty soon to be capturing despite their presence. We are damaging our own units now, so I'm going to hit backspace to turn off Fire at Will. Over here, I might as well just throw down another Blessed with Filth. That'll give all of these units in this radius an extra buff. They don't need it, they're already dominating, but what the hell, let's just do it faster. Bring Skrolk over here. Plague Monk Censer Bearers are losing to a skink. But they are doing lots and lots of damage. Okay, technically they're losing to a skink and some spears. So keep that in mind about your Plague Monks and your Censer Bearers. They do quite a bit of damage, especially against low armored units. But they are... I'm sorry, the Censer Bearers actually do good damage against armored units, but they're not going to hold the front line. They're kind of like Sisters of Slaughter or Red-Crested Skinks. They're something you want to bring in to supplement your front line. They're not going to hold for very long. So right now, I have a couple of different options. I can raise the settlement, which means I won't have to worry about them for a while. I can sack it, which means they're going to come back and bother me. Right now, I really just want to have my attention focused on the Dark Elves so I can secure my first province. So normally I would raise this, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to do Expand Under Empire, which is going to give us the opportunity to build some Under Empire buildings, which will be useful for a variety of things, namely for generating more food. We want as much food as possible. So with that being done, I'm going to bring Ratty Boy over here to heal up a little bit, and I'm going to get him in the mindset to go screw with some elves. In terms of leveling him up, I probably shouldn't have done Tail Weapon. I should have done Pestilent Breath first. You want to get Plague as soon as possible. Plague is really great. It's a big area of effect spell that does damage and significant debuffs to your enemies. Pestilent Breath spawns Plague Monks. Vermintide spawns. It acts like the menace below, and it spawns more Clan Rats. Arcane Conduit is super great. Lets you cast a lot more spells. And then these are his unique things up here. Warpstone tokens and all these things are useful. Giving him some armor, I would say, or melee defense would be useful, but he doesn't get that until here. So don't think of Skrolk as necessarily somebody who's going to be a melee powerhouse. He's not. Giving him a little extra melee bonuses could be somewhat useful, but it's really not what you should be focusing on. Okay, so now we have an Undercity under Guacamole Crater. So Undercities are buildings that aren't proper settlement buildings, but they exist under regular buildings owned by other factions. If I were to conquer this now, I would lose the Undercity. So that's just something to keep in mind. But there's a lot of stuff we can do with this. We could build burrows, which will give our local units some extra bonuses, or an underpass, which basically does the same thing. We could build the Rat King, which will eventually spawn a bonus army for us, but it's very expensive. We could do this, the Plague Cradle, or Plague Cauldron Cradle, rather, which once we get it up to this, it will constantly generate a plague from this area, which is super useful. It's really cool. But notice that it'll cost us 5 food per turn, and it will also consume money and increase discoverability. This little bar over here, when it gets to 100, the enemy will notice your buildings there, and they have an opportunity to spend a little bit of money to destroy them. So we want to keep discoverability low. What else can we do? Well, we can use these buildings here, spend a little bit of gold to hide our buildings more effectively. This one doesn't actually cost us any gold, and so it's very useful for keeping discoverability low. This will help us generate food. This gives us food and a little bit extra money. These buildings over here focus on providing money at the cost of food, and then these focus on expanding your settlements. So your undercities have a chance to expand to local settlement, to nearby settlements every turn. Very low chance, but still a chance, and this will increase that chance, as well as providing some faction-wide buffs. But once again, it's going to be expensive in terms of food and other stuff, and it's going to increase your discoverability. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to build the deeper tunnels, which is going to make sure that whatever we build next isn't discovered, and then I'm just going to go ahead and throw a food building in here. We have 2 options. We could build the raiding camp, which will generate a little bit of income but a little less food, and the scavenger raiders, which will eventually generate more food. So I'm going to focus on food. For something like this, the raiding camp, that will provide flat income and then 10% of the settlement's income itself. So right now that'd be giving us 11 gold. Wee, fascinating. No, we don't want to do that. But once we get up to Hexoatl or maybe even the Awakening, I think the Awakening will generate between 1,500 and 2,000 gold per turn, which means that if we were to build a raiding camp there, we would get 100 gold plus an extra 200 gold and 2 food. So it would make more sense to build the raiding camps in some place like that. It's initially more expensive, but it'll pay off in the long run. Notice the discoverability is 80 for that building, so we are absolutely going to need deeper tunnels, maybe even concealment or murder holes in order to keep that down. So we want to make sure that our economy is already well established before we go into some of those more advanced buildings, at least in my opinion. What else can we do this turn? Our buildings for the more advanced units are going to finish next turn, so we don't need to worry about recruitment, which is great because you can't recruit in March stance anyway. What are our buildings that we can build? Let's go ahead and plop down the exotic animal pen so that we can get that extra food generation. And same thing over here, we're going to get up to an extra food there. So in 3 turns, we'll have increased our food production by another 2, which is great because pretty soon we're also going to start getting technologies, with Ruthless Plans being the one you probably want to go for first. That's another food. All of this starts to really add up and become very useful very quickly. So let's end this turn and get ready for some new units on turn 5. Okay, so you notice that we just got a message saying that we have a hero available for recruitment, or rather we'll get rewarded for recruit a hero. That only shows up when you have a hero available for recruitment. So when we built the Pox Cauldron over here, we unlock the ability to recruit Plague Priests. We also unlock the ability to recruit Warlock Engineers with the Construction Cavern, but we're less worried about them right now. They're great units, but we're going to focus on Skrolk's speciality, which is the Plague Boys. So moving him over here to get him ready to go mess up the High Elves, or the Dark Elves rather, in a couple of minutes. Just thinking out loud here. One thing that I didn't do here is I didn't build a wall on this settlement on Subatoon, because I really wanted to get those Plague Claw catapults. As a general rule, you do want to try to get walls up, because look, we don't have walls on the settlement. We only have 8 units in our garrison. If we take a look at our garrison, wrong button, sorry. If we take a look at our garrison here, what do we got? Warlock Engineer, that's pretty okay. 2 Skaven Slaves, a couple of Night Runners, which are decent range units, but they're mostly used for harassing rather than doing like tons of range damage. And then some Clan Rats, which are, they're Clan Rats. They're not amazing units either. Little Lusty Nick over here is going to get his army back up to speed pretty quickly, and we're not going to be able to hold out against much. So having those walls with those towers and a couple extra units in our garrison would really be helpful. I still do think that having the access to the Plague Claw catapults was a wiser decision, but once I get access to this settlement over here, I'm probably going to want to destroy the construction cavern and replace it with walls, and then rebuild the construction cavern over here. Okay, so Skrolk has already moved. Our buildings have already been done. Now, we want to get one of our Plague Priests. So Plague Priests are essentially the hero versions of Skrolk, or of the Grey Seer leader units, Lord units. They will provide us with extra spell casts, and most importantly, they will provide us with more uses of the Menace Below. So in order to pick one up, you go to the Recruit Hero tab, to the Sorcerer tab, and then to the Plague Priest tab. So we got 2 available, Morphin Rot and Pestilich, excuse me. So ideally, you want to get one with the Knowledgeable trait. The Knowledgeable trait will increase your Winds of Magic by 5, which is great. And the more you get, the more that battery increases. Right now, we have a choice between Sharp Claws and Disciplined. Which one to choose? Well, these guys are casters, they're sorcerers. They're not going to do very well in melee at all. Skrolk can do okay because he's a legendary lord, he got some cheats on, but these guys are going to friggin' melt, so forget that. This isn't very useful for him at all. Disciplined isn't great either, but it's something that can stack. So this will make our units just a little bit better, and it applies to every single unit in our army. So given the choice, I'm going to go with Pestiboy over here. We get a little bit of extra warp stone for doing that. It's not great, but whatever, it's free, we'll take it. And we eventually want him to join up with Skrolk, but it's going to take him a turn to do that, no problem. So in the meantime, we're going up against the Dark Elves, so we can recruit 2 units that'll be useful to us. We can recruit the Plague Monks, or we can recruit the Plague Claw Catapults. Now, I personally, we already have quite a few monks, so I'm going to go with the Catapults. They are useful at peppering enemies before they even get into melee with us. Notice, however, that they take 2 turns to recruit. So something you might want to do is, I don't have enough money for this, I don't think, but you might want to do 2 units of Plague Claw Catapults and 1 unit of Plague Monks if you have enough money. That way, within 2 turns, you'll have 2 Catapults and 2 Monks, and you know, that's good. You have more units. More is good. For now, though, I guess I'll throw in a Skaven Slave Pack. We don't really need them, but hey, it certainly doesn't hurt. And why not some Slingers, just to keep that pepper pouring on the enemies. There might be a little bit of microphone noise here as I readjust. I just noticed that my microphone was slipping down a little bit, and that's no good, so apologies for the inconsistent audio quality there. Okay, so who's attacking us? So little Lusty Nick over here decided that he wanted to mess with us, and because I was a goober and didn't build walls, we're at a bit of a disadvantage compared to if we had. Then again, it's skinks. We're not exactly quaking in our boots over here. That being said, because we have Skaven corruption in the province, I think I mentioned this before, that the more Skaven corruption you have, the more free uses of Menace Below you get. We actually already have 2 extra units of Clan Rats, so keep that in mind, that this unit panel over here isn't showing you how many Clan Rats you have in reserve with the Menace Below. In fact, I might even want to just increase this just a little bit. Now, I don't want to pop this down into the red, so I'm going to be careful. We don't need that many. I mean, like, 1 unit of Clan Rats will probably be able to wipe out half of one of these at least, so we don't need to go crazy with this. That being said, let's jump right in and take care of our little Lusty boy. Yes, I know it's Lustigny, but I mean, come on. It's Lusty Nicholas. We all know what he's up to behind closed doors. Not that I'm judging, but come on. Lizards are freaks. Let's get started here. So, notice that our Night Runners have Vanguard deployment. That means that they can deploy anywhere within the zone encapsulated by these white lines, whereas our other units can only deploy within the yellow lines. So they can actually sneak up and get behind the enemies or do a little bit of harassment. So I'll show you a couple of cool things you can do with Night Runners. They're not going to do a ton of damage. They only have 20 missile strength, but when you compare them to our little Skaven Slave Slingers, they're going to do twice as much damage. They also have less range, but they have firewall moving and dodge, which means that they can run around and bother the shit out of these poor little skinky boys without having to pause, fire, reload, and then move. So they're quite versatile little harassment units. I don't think they're as good as the chameleon skinks that the lizardmen have, but hey, they're still decent. Our Warlock Engineer has the access to Warp Lightning, which is a great little area of effect spell. I'll show you what that does. In terms of deployment, once again, it's a very simple battle, so I'll bring our missile units over here. They'll do what they can. I'll bring our melee infantry over here. They'll do what they can. And our Warlock Engineer does a little bit of armor-piercing damage. He wouldn't win in a duel, I don't think, against our Lusty Nick over here, but that being said, he can still do something, so, you know, let's not waste his potential. I'm going to bring these guys over here. It doesn't really matter in a battle this small where you put them, but trying to build some good habits, I'll put them... Let's take a look at the terrain. So missile units, obviously, you want them to fire over the heads of your melee infantry. So one thing we could do is we could put the melee infantry down here, and then we could bring the range units up here and try to put them on the hill. That's something you want to get into the habit of doing, is every once in a while just look at your terrain, look at the elevation in it, and make sure you're keeping that in mind. I'm going to have these boys loop around the side here. So that they can try and get some damage in on the back lines. Our little Nicholas over here is going to try to engage with them, but they should be fast enough to outrun him. Over here we have our Warlock Engineer, who is holding his own against skinks. Like I said, he'll be able to do some damage. He's not going to excel at it. But let's take a look at this Warp Lightning spell, which is super great. So Keep in mind that spells like this will actually hurt your own units if they hit them, but a hero unit or a lord unit is not going to be damaged very much by this at all. So I'm going to plop it right down here. Just take a look at what happens to these little lizard boys. Lightning from the sky, kaboom! Okay, so that took off about a quarter, maybe a fifth to a quarter of their health, about as much as a shot from Plague Claw Catapult. It has a relatively small strike area, and it's not going to do a lot of damage against armored units, but it's something. And so far, this little Warlock Engineer over here has done almost 2,000 damage. That being said, he's about 2 scurry away because he's not a melee infantry person. But, so let's see if we can help him out. Let's take a menace below and plop it down right behind him and have these rats try to get behind the skinks, and that'll turn the balance in favor for our little Warlock Engineer. Now notice while I've been focusing on helping out Abshit, his name's Abshit, sorry, I haven't been paying attention to these guys, which means that they're probably not doing all that well. So I'm going to go ahead and send my Night Runners behind here. I mean, our clan rats are holding the line, so they're not like failing miserably. Actually, they're doing quite well against this cohort. But if we get some missile damage in from behind, that'll be even better. The trees will get in our way, so we're not going to be able to do a whole lot. Actually, you know what? For these Night Runners over here, if I try and shoot through the trees, it's not going to hit anything. So I have a couple options. I can attack these guys, but they're going to melt anyway, so they're already about to break, so don't even worry about that. I'm going to hold down left alt, and I'm going to right click to send them into melee mode to attack these guys. They are actually decent melee combatants. They're not great, but their dodge ability lets them survive for slightly longer, certainly, than a Skaven slave. And they'll be able to do a little bit of damage and function as reasonable melee units. Given that the skinks are already damaged and we already have our clan rats doing their job, that should be fine. And if I really wanted to screw up these lizardsmen, which is kind of pointless now since they're already basically broken, they're fleeing, we'll pop down a menace below and flank them from the other side. So you're probably getting a sense of the rhythm and pace of Skaven at this point. Lots of units that aren't necessarily amazing in and of themselves, but nonetheless, when used in combination, and when you manage to keep up that momentum, just keep stuff going and going and going, that's how you wear your opponents down. That's how you really get that Skaven sauce to help with your progress pasta. There's a joke in there somewhere, I just don't know where it is. Now, something to keep in mind is fleeing units can recover and can return to the battlefield. So sometimes it's useful to just take one of your weaker units that's faster and have them pursue a fleeing unit, because that means there are a fewer units that could return to fight you later on, and B, there are fewer survivors after the battle. So if the enemy retreats or whatnot, they still have a chance to use those units against you in a future battle. You shouldn't just be thinking about the battle you're currently fighting. You should be thinking about the next battle and the next battle and the next battle. What can you do in this battlefield to not only secure yourself a victory in this engagement, but to set yourself up well for the future? Well, there's one thing I can do here. Since little Abshit is fleeing with his tail between his legs, I can go ahead and pop down a menace below, send him some reinforcements, and then hopefully that'll give him enough ratty courage to be able to pop off one more of those warp lightnings. At which point, something to keep in mind about the Skaven too is one of their abilities is called Life is Cheap, and it certainly is when it comes to the Skaven. You get a lot of expendable units and cheap units, and units that spawn and cost you nothing and eventually degrade. So if, say, this guy were to open up and pour lightning down on them, who cares? As long as you're dealing more damage to the enemy than you are to yours, you can go ahead and have them eat some hurt for you. Let's see. These skinks are about to leave the battlefield. That's great. Now, Lusty Nick is holding his own. Damn, he's actually done quite a bit of damage to our poor little ratty boys. That's because he managed to get in melee with our Skaven slaves. So something that you might want to do, especially if you're like me and your attention is all over the place, you're not focused on micro the way that you should be, bring these guys over here and set them to skirmish mode. This means that they will run away from anybody that tries to attack them in melee. Now, the pathfinding AI for skirmish mode is broken as all get out, so they'll probably wind up doing some stupid shit. They probably wind up getting caught eventually, but for now, it'll at least get them out of harm's way. And ideally, you know, if Lustig had been chasing them while we were dealing with these, it means that he's not actively dealing damage to us, reducing our casualties and keeping these Skaven slaves alive so that they can help chase fleeing units, or, you know, just do something else. They're not great, but they can do more than literally nothing. I'm going to go ahead and pop down a Warp Lightning here. It's not going to do much. Keep in mind that it takes about 5 or 6 seconds for this to actually strike the ground, so I don't want to cast it on top of them, right? I want to try and see, okay, they're running over here, so maybe I'll put it like there. I think that's actually might work out quite nicely. Let's see. They're going to dodge it. Okay, so that can happen sometimes. But just something to keep in mind. That hardly costs us anything. It's 6 winds of magic. We have a reserve of 25, or a reserve of 62, and a pool of 25 available to us right now. Part of the reason why you also want to get like plague priests and stuff in your army is because there is a significant cooldown on your spells, so you want to keep that momentum up and be able to cast spells, you know, every few seconds if you're using lower cost spells and whatnot. Now we could end this battle right here, or we could take our fast boys and have them try to pursue their units. Keep in mind that since Lustig is a lord, if we kill him, he will immediately be replaced by another lord at full health. So it's actually to our advantage to let him leave with in a wounded state. So if we wanted to min-max this, we would try to get him down as low as possible without killing him, so that next turn, if we wanted to fight him again, he would already be at death's door. Whereas for the individual units, if you are chasing them, you might as well try to eliminate them completely, because you know, they're not going to be regenerated or replaced for free. I tried to lead my shot there a little bit. I was a little too aggressive, and so they were able to just kind of gently wander away without taking any damage. Lucky them, but he's only got 70 troops remaining, so it's not like he's going to be able to do a whole lot next turn. Okay, I'm gonna keep going until we have this first region secured, and then if there's interest, I can go ahead and pick up another region in a subsequent video, but this is getting kind of long, and we have gone over most of the initial mechanics. I will mention that you see this little icon over here, the spread corruption. Our plague priests will increase the amount of corruption we have in any given region where they're in. That, once again, will reduce public order, but will increase the number of uses of menace below that we have in that region without having to use food. So it is definitely a useful ability. We still have one more turn before this Plague Claw Catapult comes in, so I'm going to use that turn to get us some more Plague Monks. Notice here that the Plague Monks are... Okay, so the Skaven slaves are super, super cheap. But the Plague Monks actually aren't that much more expensive for Skrolk. If you were to put them in another army, I think they're like, you know, they're twice that amount, right? Let's see. Yep, he reduces them by 50%, so my math ain't all that great, but I think that means they would be at 188 upkeep cost per turn, whereas, you know, right now they're at 94, so we can have a whole army of these guys instead of Skaven slaves, essentially. I mean, obviously, I should say instead of clan rats. Especially when you're playing as Lord Skrolk, you never need clan rats. You should just be recruiting plague monks, at least for Skrolk's army. Note that bonus will not apply to other armies. You will still get the regular cost. It's a thing that's unique to Skrolk himself, but still, that's part of the reason why we also want to get that tier 3 settlement building as soon as possible, because plague monks are decent units, but in the hands of Lord Skrolk, who provides them with buffs and gets them for cheap, they are excellent, especially in the early game. I did notice that we have a right available, the Pestilence Scheme. So what the Pestilence Scheme will do, let's go ahead and do that. We don't really need to do this right now. In fact, it would be wiser to wait till later, but just to give you an idea of what it is useful for, it will spawn this little guy, this little Plague Priest over here, or Pestilence Scheme Priest, rather. You send him to an enemy settlement, it will inflict the settlement with a plague, which will reduce the upkeep, or I forget exactly what it does. It makes their settlements not good because they are filled with plague. Let's just go ahead. You know what? Let's just go ahead and infect Thrice Cursed Peak over here. So this will consume your Plague Priest or Pestilent Scheme Priest, and you won't be able to get another one for another 15 turns, but honestly, that's not long. And now you can see that this settlement is inflicted with plague, which means its growth is stunted and its income is reduced by half. Not to mention that if they had an army garrisoned here, that army would take heavy attrition every single turn, even if they're in the garrison. So normally when you're garrisoned up, you will replenish your troops. That will not only cancel the replenishment, but will also, in fact, add attrition on top of that. Also, the plague it lasts 8 turns, which is good. It's about half, it's half the amount of time that it takes to get another one up. So it lasts quite a bit of time, and it can spread to other armies and to other settlements. So it could spread over here, over here, over here. And that way you're going to be doing a lot of attrition. Attrition isn't a thing. So it's great. And for Lord Skrolk only, if you're playing as Clan Pestilens, it will actually bolster your troops and provide your settlements with bonuses. So if you're playing as other Skaven Lords, it's not going to do that. It's actually more risky because you can infect your own settlements and your own armies and screw yourself over. So you have to be very careful with it. But with Lord Skrolk, it's like, hey, you damage everybody else, you screw up their day, ruin their birthday parties, and you make yourself all the stronger for it. It really has no disadvantages if you're playing as Clan Pestilens. Now let's see where we're at. So there's still a lot more that we could talk about the what our potential allies or diplomacy friends are doing over there, but our sole goal right now is to get us into the Sentinel time as soon as possible. So let's bring Skrolky Boy over here. There's a couple of different things we could do, right? We could get into Use Underway, which would help us bypass some of these trees over here, which will slow us down, get us there all that faster. We could put ourselves into March Stance, which would also get us there a little bit faster, but notice we still have 2 spots in our army. We have a strong enough economy, and we have access to Plague Monks. I could take 2 turns and get Plague Cloud Catapults, but instead of that, I really do want to get this settlement ASAP, so I'm going to bring Skrolk over here. Since we're still in our settlement, we can recruit even though we have consumed all our movement. I'm thinking back to the first turn where I wasn't able to recruit anything. I'm not sure why that is. But yeah, generally when you're in your own settlement, even if you consume 100% of your movement, you can still recruit units. So I don't know what happened that first turn. I'll have to go back and look at that. Now keep in mind, if I wanted to go and attack Guacamole Crater and either conquer that settlement or just wipe these guys out, we'd actually be in a decent position to do that, or we'd have something important to consider, and this is something worth considering at all times when you're attacking settlements as Skaven. Notice that they have one lord that's actually in the settlement and garrisoning it up. Say that 10 times fast. And then we have this other guy, our Lusty Boy, is outside. So if we were to attack, we could do one of 2 things. We could attack the settlement itself, or we could attack Lusty outside. If we attack Lusty outside, one of 2 things can happen. We could ambush him, in which case we would attack his army alone, and we could delete these guys without even having to touch the settlement garrison. Or we could wind up, if the ambush fails, we wind up attacking this guy, and this guy, or the settlement garrison rather, outside of the settlement walls. So that can be a really powerful thing. It's something where the ambush stance, which is really, really powerful, can sort of backfire, because maybe you don't want to ambush them, maybe you just want to attack these guys directly, and incorporate these armies into the fight. I hope that's making sense. Essentially, if you attack the settlement directly, you'll have to go through that battle again that we've already been through twice, and go over the walls and all that, or build siege engines, or whatever you call them, I forget the names of them, the scaffolds, the siege towers, or whatever they're called, battering rams, stuff like that. yeah, since we have some siege engines in our army, we don't have to, but for other units, we might have to. Um, so really, the ideal situation here, if we attack this, would be to not get an ambush when we attack him, because then we get to eliminate everybody in the garrison along with this army. But if you do get an ambush, it's not the end of the world, because you're still able to delete these 2 units, or whoever's in this army, without having to deal with the walls, without engaging with this army. And so, I mean, ambush stance is useful no matter which way you slice it. Okay, we are nearing turn 8 at this point. We are getting attacked by the settlement, not by the settlement garrison, but by this lizard who was in there. This is going to be another very easy battle. Unfortunately for the Skaven, a lot of times the balance of power will not accurately reflect the strength of your army. So I have no doubts that we can win this battle. That being said, the balance of power is drunk and thinks that we will lose, so we have to go in. If we were to auto-resolve that, we probably would have lost. And if you lose an auto-resolve battle, your whole army gets deleted, so it's not good for your health. Let's just run in here and take care of these guys really quickly. So keep in mind, skink cohorts have shields. If we want to damage them with our melee units, or with our ranged units rather, we want to get behind them. These skink cohorts with javelins don't, or do they? Oh, they do. Okay, they do, and they do poison damage, which is equivalent to our Blessed with Filth thing. So they also have 3 or 4, they have 4 volleys of pretty decent ammunition, so they will do quite a bit of damage to our chaff if we let them. So ideally, we want to close the gap with them as quickly as possible, which can be a little hard because they're pretty fast. Let's take a look at their speed. So their speed is actually 37 compared to ours. Okay, we're exactly as fast. So if we want to catch up with them so that they don't damage us, we can have our Night Runners or our Skaven Safe Slingers chase after them. And the Night Runners have a speed of 48, so they'll have no problem. Or Menace Below, and remember, these Menace Below uses are free since we have high Skaven Corruption. I forget if I spent food on them. I don't think I did. But look, so we spawn these guys over here, and it's actually changing their trajectory. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't necessarily want to use Menace Below to just, like, I could have put it right here, right behind our other clan rats, and said, okay, we'll just have 2 units of clan rats here, and that'll help them win this battle. But instead, you can use them for all kinds of crazy stuff, like diverting the course of the enemies. At this point, I'm not going to be able to catch them with these guys, but they're in a great position to come in and flank from behind, whereas our Night Runners have already whittled these guys down. I'll have one of them chase to continue reducing their numbers, which will discourage them from attacking next turn, and I'll have the other one chase these guys to try and whittle them down as well. I'll put them in skirmish mode because I'm not going to be focusing on them as much. I want them to run away automatically if my attention is off of them. I'm going to do the same thing with this. And going back over here, let's see, I can throw down a use of Warp Lightning on this skink cohort, but keep in mind, it is going to damage my own troops, so let's take a look at that. Yeah, I did tickle my clan rats over there. It sounds like a bad euphemism. Tickle my clan rat. Yes, done much damage to my own troops, but that is a very Skaven thing to do, so don't feel too guilty about that. Life is, after all, very cheap in the Skaven Warrens. These boys are going to pop up on my biz pretty soon, so boom, and I throw down Menace Below. Now I should have probably put the Menace Below right in the middle of them, because that would have prevented them from running away. At this point, they could very easily loop around the side here, but they're being nice for some reason and not doing. Oh yeah, now they're taking off. Okay, so we'll have the Night Runners chase them, because the Night Runners can actually catch up with them. Have the Skaven Slave Slingers go into guard mode, so they'll basically just stay on top of this hill and attack anybody who comes near, including these guys over here. Put them in skirmish mode in case somebody comes up to mess with them, they'll run away. These guys won't be able to catch the skink cohort anytime soon, so unfortunately they'll probably just fade out without doing very much. this Saurus Old Blood over here would absolutely ruin the day of our Warlock Engineer if we left him close enough. So I don't actually want to duel him. I don't want to deal with him unless I absolutely have to. Look, the battle's only been going for like under 4 minutes. He's already done 3,200 damage. He's already killed 70 almost of our units, and taken pretty much no damage himself. I don't want to put my Warlock Engineer anywhere near him. So I'm going to focus on deleting as many of the other units as I can, and that will get us closer to inflicting the army loss penalty, which will make it easier for us to win the battle without taking heavy casualties from him. Granted, this is a garrison, so it's not quite this, it'll replenish pretty quickly, but if they decide to attack us next turn, we want to have as many healthy, fresh troops as we possibly can. Once again, we're not just thinking about this battle, we're thinking about 2 or 3 battles ahead. What can we do right now to set us up well for the future? These skinks are coming back. I'm going to annoy them with my Skaven Slave Slingers. They do have shields, so remember, depending on what kind of shield an enemy has, it will block a certain amount of small arms fire coming from the front. So these guys have bronze shields, which means that 35% of every missile attack that hits them has a 35% chance to do 0 damage, essentially. We're still hurting them. I mean, they're still very low tier units, so we're still doing something. Skaven Slave Slingers aren't totally useless, but also they're not going to win us the day on their own. As well as these boys over here who are actually kind of screwing us over. They're trying to attack the Saurus Old Blood, but actually they're hitting our own troops in the back. Well, I guess they're not doing too bad, but that is something to keep in mind, is that, if I were to put these guys over here and manually attack the Saurus Old Blood, inevitably some of their attacks would hit us in the back behind our shields. Life is cheap, so you don't always want to worry too much about damaging your own troops, but still, especially when we know that this old boy over here is going to be giving us lots of trouble, we don't want to be unnecessarily damaging our own troops. In fact, if you can manage to save stuff like that for your spawned units, it winds up being better. And, who cares if you wind up damaging some of the menace below units? They're going to die anyway, no matter what. They're not going to be, you're not going to retain them after the battle. So it makes a lot more sense to just do that. Now, however, they really don't have many more troops left. They've got a couple of these skinks over here, which that was a bad cast. I was too fast there. But, still going to do some damage with that. It took a good chunk. I should have plopped it down right here. He's doing okay against them. He's racking up some kills. He doesn't need much help. But why not send these Night Runners in? They are decent melee combatants. They do have dodge, and they're fast, so they can get right in there and reinforce them and get right behind their backs. And by the time they're dead, this guy will probably be discouraged enough to want to leave, and if not, we can just keep throwing chaff at him over and over again until he decides to get on the bus and get out of Skaven Town. These guys over here aren't really doing anything. Let's send them to chase, or actually take the Night Runners. The Night Runners are decent melee combatants, like I mentioned before, so we're actually going to send them in over here. Okay, we won, but if not, we could have cycled these guys out as their vigor gets reduced, as they start to get exhausted and tired. We can send in these Night Runners and have these two rest over here. These guys are pretty badly bruised. I could try to fire off an extra Warp Lightning. I think it was a bad cast. Yep, they're going to try to... Oh, we got something? We tickled them a little bit, it doesn't hurt. But we're not gonna, we didn't delete the unit, so they will replenish next turn. So yeah, I'm sort of sorry that I don't have anything, any more advanced battles just yet, but that could come in an episode 2. I chose to take food there. You could go either way. I mean, you're not gonna get that much either way out of a battle so small. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind, right? Is that after winning a battle against infantry, not a settlement, not a garrison, you can choose between getting extra food, getting extra money, or getting extra replenishment. And I think the amount of food is always 2. So if you are fighting small battles against small amounts of units, just pick the food. Like, you're hardly going to get any replenishment or any extra money, and food is always useful. And it might not seem like a lot, it's 2, right? But hey, you might fight 3 or 4 battles against small units, you know, even in the early game, and that adds up. You get, all of a sudden you have an extra 8 food. You might have bumped yourself up into a new territory. Maybe now you can afford to get an extra tier of the settlement. It's definitely not going to hurt you. So I'm closing in on the end of this here. This is a tiny garrison. We really don't need to worry that much about that garrison, but just for the sake of min-maxing like a big jerk, I am going to check my recruitment. I can recruit up to 3 units. I have plenty of money. I'm going to get rid of these guys, and I'm going to excuse me, I said I'm going to get rid of these guys, and I'm going to replace them with more plaguey boys, so they'll be ready to wipe this out next turn. Now, notice these dwarves are not yet plagued, but they're in a plague settlement, so I bet you a dime to a dozen they are going to be plagued up next turn. You can start to see them take attrition. As a matter of fact, I might add a battle against these dwarves to this video just so that we have a bit of a more difficult battle to demonstrate, because this is going to be nothing, right? We're going to just take this, we can auto-resolve that, we'll take no casualties. Sigh. Fighting these guys again. You know what? I'm just gonna be real cheesy with this. I'm gonna put menace. So something to keep in mind too, I think I mentioned this before, but if you increase the uses of menace below, you should see this increase slightly. I think we're gonna lose this auto resolve. But at this point you guys should know how to fight this battle on your own. Yep. So just keep that in mind, right? It's important to go over loss scenarios as well. We lost that whole battle because we auto-resolved, and the auto-resolve was not in our favor, and if you lose auto-resolve, you will lose all of your units. Also, if you lose an auto-resolve battle in a settlement, you will lose that as well. But, here's the thing. Life is cheap, remember? We lost that battle, but did we really lose much? We took a little damage to our buildings, and yeah, that's going to cost us a bit of money to repair, but look at this guy. He is at death's door. He can do nothing now. So, really, sometimes being lazy pays off. If you don't, well, as I say that, they took 3,200 gold with them. So, yeah, okay. Fight the battle yourself. Don't throw your money away. But at the same time, it's not exactly the end of the world, is it? Or is it? It is. Okay, so let's take a look at this. They actually reduced our settlement level down from 3 to 2, which means we now have to spend population surplus, which we should be spending on Auxil in order to get that back up. Also, our Plague Monk building got destroyed. Also, our construction cavern got destroyed. So that was a big mistake. Don't do that. Don't be lazy like I was. Fight the battle manually, otherwise you could wind up screwing yourself over. That being said, we will take a minute to look at this plague mechanic. So notice I got infected by the plague over here. Over here on Thrice Cursed Peak, the enemy settlement, the dwarf settlement, they got infected by the plague, and their growth and income is going down. But because I'm Lord Skrolk, I have an increase of growth, an increase of income, and a reduced construction time for 3 turns. That's not bad. Meanwhile, Guacamole Crater over here got infected, and he would probably get infected too if he were to go over there. So the plague will spread on its own, and it will continue damaging everybody else around us while bolstering us. It's super great. This settlement got infected, this settlement got infected, so we were all ready to steamroll these boys over here, but now it's going to be even easier because their settlement is all kinds of messed up. So I'm just going to go ahead and occupy this at level 3, because that will bring us up to speed with having a province that's secured. Once again, this is not optimal. I shouldn't have done the auto resolve. That being said, hey, look, we got a settlement. That's definitely we got a province rather. That's definitely good. And it's time to level up our plague boys. So I'm going to give Lord Skrolk Vermintide, which is going to give us the ability to spawn clan rats in battle, similar to the Menace below, without consuming food. And Plaguey Boy over here is going to get Pestilent Breath, simply because we want to get him to Vermintide as well. So keep in mind, if you have Skrolk and you have Pesticlich or any other Plague Priest, in fact you have like 3 or 4 Plague Priests, I think this ability gives you 5 uses of Vermintide per battle. So, I mean, it does cost Winds of Magic, but it's not that much. So If I were to, say, attack the dwarves over here, with the Skaven corruption in the province, I'd probably get 2 uses of the Menace Below. Then I could increase that up to 7 if I spent the food. Then I could add 5 to that with Skrolk. And then I could add another 5 for each subsequent Plague Priest. I think, actually, if you upgrade this ability, you get an extra use. I'm not 100% sure how many you get, but I think you can get up to 8. So for every Plague Priest you add, you can get a ton of extra clan rats, which can be cast simultaneously if you have multiple Plague Priests in your army. So you can totally overrun them with chaff. It's basically like the Skaven equivalent of a Zerg Rush. That all being said, unfortunately, I would really love to have some Plague Claw Catapults to use against these dwarves, but unfortunately, because I was a dodo, I screwed up and don't have those buildings anymore. So I'm going to get Clan Rats just because they're a little bit beefier than Skaven Slaves, and I no longer have access to my beautiful Plague Boys. I'm going to go ahead and throw down a weapons dump because the Skaven weapons teams are absolutely exceptional. Now, usually what I'll do in terms of a settlement commandment or province commandment is I will do exploitative planning because that adds more Skaven corruption, which means more uses of the Menace Below and more food generated, which, you know, at this point I think I've established how good the food is to have. You could also recruit, add to your recruitment capacity, you could increase your growth, you could increase your public order, but here's the thing, we don't have any technologies researched yet. That's a bit of a problem. Because there's a lot of really powerful stuff here, including getting more passive food gain. I want this Ruthless Plans, and I can only get this Ruthless Plans if I build another building, which isn't what I wanted to do. But what I do want to do, is get the Dominating Scheme, because for 5 turns that will give us 3 food, 40 growth, and the recruitment costs and public order benefits. In order to unlock this, though, I need to use Expansionist Planning. So Expansionist Planning, I don't think it's great in and of itself. It gives us a little extra growth, which is great, but hey, if you're getting increased food, you're going to get the growth anyway. So this is kind of like, you know, why would you even bother getting this if you could just get more food? I'll tell you why. Because it unlocks this right. And you basically want to pop this off whenever it's available. It will generate the equivalent of 15 food for you, and you can use it again in 10 turns once it's expired. So it's super useful. Now, why don't we have any other research going? Well, because I haven't built the buildings that are useful and required for these. So in order to get those going, we have a couple different options. We can build the Rattling Warrens, which will unlock Ferocious Plans. That will give us more recruitment capacity, which is absolutely essential, so it's useful to have that. Let's go ahead and throw that down, and let's look at what our options are for the next building. We can do Rubbish Pit, which will unlock Devious Plans. What does Devious Plans do? Devious Plans reduces our upkeep for Skaven Slaves. So if you're playing as Clan Ashen and you're focusing on Night Runners and Gutter Runners, you might want to prioritize this over this. This will make it easier for you to get those units up and empower them a little bit, make them a little bit cheaper. But, this will give you replenishment. This will give you armor for your Clan Rats and Skaven Slaves, which are, usually good fodder units for any faction. I personally usually try to go with Ruthless Plans for that initial 1 food generation, not to mention the growth is great, and then Carved Under Tunnels is super useful. That movement range stacks with the movement range that you get from this skill here, Root Marcher. And if you were to recruit, I don't know if I have enough money to do this now. All right, I lost that building. But if you have the building to recruit a Warlock Engineer, they also have a skill that increases your movement. I think by up to 15%, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But that all stacks. So if you get all that together by turn 10 or 15, you can be zooming around the map with not a care in the world. It's really, really useful. So I am going to go ahead and actually get the Taskmaster's platform. That will unlock Ruthless Plans, and that will put us on the path to getting Carved Under Tunnels, which I want as soon as possible. As for Ferocious Plans, same thing. I'm going to choose the Rattling Warrens once they're available over the Rubbish Pit. You want both of them. Now, something to keep in mind also about this is the Rubbish Pit will increase our local recruitment capacity. So if I were to build a rubbish pit here, here, and here, then rather than only being able to recruit 3 units, I'd be able to recruit 6 units here. If I get this technology, I would be able to recruit 7. And if I then use, martial planning, I'd be able to recruit 8. So if you, a lot of the times with Skaven, individual abilities aren't that great, but if you synergize them, you can absolutely steamroll. So it's very much like playing Zerg if you've ever played StarCraft 2. The whole point of being Skaven is versatility and adaptability. So you want to, if somebody were to be approaching, if these boys got cheeky and these boys got cheeky and they started to encroach on your borders, you could turn that on and throw down a couple extra buildings like this, which are super cheap. Look at that, it's not even 200 gold, and you can build it in 2 turns. So I could get rid of this Taskmaster's platform, I could get rid of something else if I needed to, I could even get rid of this, and in 3 turns I could increase my recruitment capacity by 4 or 5 and just crank out units and absolutely steamroll them. Even if I was just getting Skaven slaves, I could really turn the tide of battle. That being said, we're closing in on turn 10 here. We have gone over most of the basic mechanics, given a pretty great introduction. So what better way to close up this little series here, this little info session, by having a decent battle. I would absolutely prefer to have more plate clock catapults, but the dwarvies over here, the stunties over here, are going to give us some problems. They're a lot harder to deal with than the Dark Elves, especially on lower difficulties. I think on higher difficulties, later in the campaign, the Dark Elves will be harder. But right now, they're particularly hard because they have a ton of armor, and we mostly have chaff units that don't have any armor piercing, except for the Plague Claw catapults. So these will be super useful in helping us demolish these stunty boys. But notice something else here. This army actually contracted the plague from hanging out in this plague settlement. Dwarves are kind of dumb. All they really want to do is stay at home, drink beer, and not leave. They're essentially agoraphobic, and they will not leave their settlement unless they have a good reason to, which means that they would prefer to get the plague than to go outside. That's great for us because, look, this unit has already gotten down to 1/3 of its health, or it's going to at the end of this turn. We can't see how much attrition these guys have taken, but it's probably up there as well. So we're already in a good position, and this is going to be a tough battle because they have 14 units in their army, in their garrison, and then 5 units in the settlement garrison. So we're in for a bit of a headache, especially since, unit per unit, their friggin' dwarf warriors with great weapons could carve up Skaven slaves all day, no problem. But I think with this extra attrition, we'll be in a really good spot to deal with them. Let's check out our rights. Okay, so now that we have expansionist planning, just before we jump into the battle, before we get started with the battle, the fact that we have expansionist planning enabled has allowed us to unlock this dominating scheme right. We throw that down, and now we've got more food coming in, more growth coming in, and that'll let us get these buildings repaired and upgraded. Notice also that since I built the rubbish pit, I have unlocked devious plans, and if I go here and destroy the rubbish pit, it's not going to remove this technology. Once you build this, for the first time, you no longer have to maintain it in order to maintain the technology. So you can very quickly just throw down a Taskmaster's platform, a rubbish pit, and Rattling Warren all in one turn, and then when they're built, you can build the technologies and then delete the buildings. You want to make sure to actually get the technologies researched first before you destroy the buildings, because otherwise they will get locked out again. But now that I have them available, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and get that done, and then I can get rid of this afterwards. Actually, I'm not 100% sure about that. It might be unlocked permanently now, but just to be safe, I'm going to encourage you to do the research first before you throw the buildings away. But just the key takeaway is you don't have to keep the buildings at that point after you get the research rate. Okay, with that mouthful being delivered. One final thing to do is then to switch this back to exploitative planning, which will give us more food. You might say, okay, well, we're going to lose the growth bonus from expansionist planning, but remember, the more food we get, the more growth we have. We can max out at 20 growth here, and this would have only given us, 20 growth anyway. So we'll lose the construction cost bonus, but I mean, we're going to have so much money anyway, that's not going to matter. So go with exploitative planning. In fact, yeah. And this will probably be the last part here. I think we can get there in one turn. Let's give that a shot. Oh, come on. I hate it when that happens. Okay, so we're going to have to wait one more turn, but it's not like they're going anywhere. And actually, that works out to our advantage because they are, they left. They just up and left. Okay, well, I guess that's a little unfortunate. I can show you a couple other things really quickly. If you put yourself into raiding stance, you can gain more food. If you put yourself into use underway stance, you might be able to catch up with them. We're probably not going to be able to catch up with them before they get to their settlement capital, which means that's going to have walls, which means, yeah, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to deal with. I noticed that our Plague Priest leveled up. I have a couple choices in terms of how to upgrade him. If you hover over each of these abilities, they'll give you a description, so I won't go into all of them. I'm going to pick Vermintide, though, because more units of Clan Rats is always good. And if I can't catch these guys within the next couple turns, I am going to wrap this up, but... Oh, perfect. So they tried to use the underway to get away from us, and we actually have the opportunity to intercept them, and they are severely damaged from that plague. So unfortunately, this won't be a great example of, you know, everything we can do since they're already at a disadvantage, but I can show you just how far we've come over the course of about 10 or 11 turns, and demonstrate some of those new mechanics that we've unlocked as our lords have leveled up. So I'm actually going to just put the slaves out of the way. That we don't really need to even worry about them. And we could actually just hang back and ruin their day with Plague Claw catapults. I am going to put them in guard mode so that they don't wind up chasing enemies that we don't need them to. And I'm going to bring these boys up front. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time to really set up a perfect formation or anything here. I really just want to get in to the battle and show you what we can do. So let's take a look here. We have 4 free uses of the Menace Below. We didn't spend any food on that. We have 5 coming in from Lord Skrolk and 5 coming in. So my math isn't that great, but I'm pretty sure that's more than 10 uses of free Ratty Boys. Now, the difference between Vermintide and Menace Below is that Vermintide does have a range. So notice that you can only cast it within, you know, maybe 20, 30 feet of your Lord or Hero. You can't plop it down on the other side of the map. But that's okay. We're not going to necessarily use it in exactly the same way. Our dwarves here, our dwarven opponents, are not being cooperative. So we're going to start to move forward and get within range. Okay, so now we can start to see them. They're kind of bunched up. Our Plague Claw catapults, you can see, you know, these yellow lines indicate what their range is. We're still quite a ways away from them, so we want to bring them up. Now, a couple things we could do here. We could plop down these boys, say, over here, and we could just stay back and pepper them. But they are going to, you know, try to harass us with those grudge throwers. They're not going to be able to do much damage because, you know, there's only 2 of them, and they're not great units anyway. But, you know, I don't want to waste time with that. I don't want to just, you know, have them hanging out. So let's just get everybody up, move them up. I'm going to bump up the battle speed here to not waste y'all's time, since they're not going to do anything. Dwarves are really great at staying still, but we will be up in their grills pretty soon. How are our catapults coming along? They're coming, they're chucking. Very, very slow. Okay, I think we're close enough to start having some fun. What does this do? Okay, no need to worry about that. So, step 1. Let's take a look at this Pestilent Breath. Now remember, initially it's only going to be pointed in one direction, 360 degrees directly away from your lord. So you want to change the angle of it, and boom. Remember that it's going to expand. Usually it's going to expand beyond where the border is, actually. So keep that in mind when you cast that. Let's have our boys here spread out and encompass them. These are getting pretty close. Let's have these guys go after. You want to look for blobs of units to have them go after. We definitely want to get rid of the Thunderers because they can do quite a bit of damage. But once they get into melee, they're pretty freaking useless. So let's just rush them right away. Now, check this out. Let's go with our Plague Priest and let's throw down a Vermintide here. Let's go with Skrolk and let's throw down a Vermintide here. And then let's throw a Menace Below down here. We have 3 extra units in about 5 seconds. That is great. Now, they're not amazing units in and of themselves, but they can benefit from buffs like Blessed with Filth. Now, everybody in there has that extra buff. Bring these guys around, circle them in from the back. We're going to stop firing here because we're damaging our own units. Except, let's see, these Plague Monks are already pretty damaged, so actually let's get these guys both to fire on the Miners here. Bring those guys in, have them delete the Grudge Throwers. We're going to cast a Pestilent Breath on here, and watch what this does. Okay, so we've done 0 damage, and that spreads all the way over there. It knocks them out of formation, and it does extend beyond the border of that little preview widget. We've done 1 kill. Okay, that's nothing, right? No, we have done almost 3,000 damage for about 5 or 6 wins of magic. Okay, 8 wins of magic, but still, that's a lot. That's a lot for like a level 3 unit. And we've essentially already won this battle. And it was a combination of different things, right? Notice that these units, right, they're going up, our Plague Monks are going up against tier 1 Dwarf Warriors, and they're still taking pretty heavy casualties. I think we started off at full health with all these boys, and they're still getting damage. Our units aren't that great individually. They're not, you know, going to dominate these even like, these are tier 3 units, and they're not even going to win on a one-on-one battle against these tier 1 units. That being said, or maybe Dwarf Warriors are tier 2, I don't know Dwarves as well, but anyway, they're not great. But that being said, we have a combination of all kinds of different things. We have Plague Claw Catapults, which are doing debuffs, and they're doing, you know, armor-piercing damage, and magical damage, armor-piercing damage, and they're adding Contamination to reduce their leadership. We have these boys popping out, you know, Vermintides. They only cost 5 wins of magic, and they have a very short cooldown, so we can pop those out every 20 seconds if we have enough wins. We have the Menace Below, and to add to all that, we have our Plague, which significantly reduced all of their health before we even started the battle. So that's what it means to be Skaven. You're not going to get any units that are in and of themselves going to be able to tank a whole lot of damage or really, you know, turn the tide of battle individually, except for maybe stuff like Rattling Guns and lords like Ikka. But what you are going to have is a lot of little individual things that when you add up are nearly unstoppable. It's called the Vermintide for a reason. You want to become this unstoppable rushing tide that just builds up momentum and builds up momentum. Speaking of which, I can now capture the settlement super easy. And notice that this turn alone, we have already generated, okay, not that much, we've generated 16 food this turn alone in profit. So we've actually generated 20 food this turn if we account for the army upkeep and the settlement upkeep that we've spent on it. We have over 80 food, so we can colonize this at level 3. Next turn, or in 2 turns, we could go to the Mine of the Bearded Skulls and we could conquer that, but actually it makes more sense to go back over here for a little while, or even to go into raiding stance and build up some food. As long as we have 80 food, we can conquer this at settlement level 3. If we have 110 food, we can conquer it at level 4. If we have, I think, 130 food, we can conquer it at level 5, so we don't necessarily want to get this right away. However, check this out. Thrice Cursed Peak has a gold mine. It is currently at level 1, but because we conquered this at level 3, we can repair this. This is going to give us 300 gold per turn. Then this is going to give us 600 gold per turn, and we can get that up in less than 10 turns. That's going to be huge. Not to mention that once we get to the Mine of the Bearded Skulls, we can settle that at a minimum of level 3, and then we can get this building here, the Arcane Generators, which will increase that by 30%. I'm not even going to try to do the math. I don't even fucking remember what PEMDAS stands for, so don't quote me on this, but I think it's going to be an increase. and it's worth having. It's worth having as many little increases as you possibly can get your furry, ratty little paws on, because that starts to build up, and that's how you build the vermin tide. So, I don't believe I've actually stopped to breathe in the past hour and 43 minutes. I think I have said about as much as I possibly can about the first 13 Skaven turns. That's perfect. As you probably already know, 13 is a crucial number for the Skaven, so I'm glad that we're ending on that. I would be more than happy to expand on this in the future, but at this point, I am going to say farewell. Have a great day, and may the Council of the 13 be with you.